the test of endurance. The battle began with the terrifying, coordinated assault of the Byzantine front lines. The Roman heavy infantry, trained to fight in disciplined formations, pushed forward. Their sheer mass and the length of their lances and spears threatened to simply crush the thinner Muslim ranks. The most intense fighting was focused on the Muslim wings. The Byzantine command ordered repeated, furious charges, hoping to breach the lines and turn the enemy's flanks. The Muslim wings bent, but they did not break. Their endurance was magnificent, fueled not by superior armor, but by the conviction that Khalid had instilled. I count the heart. The discipline of the Muslim army was evident in two critical phases. The counter-skirmish. As the Byzantine heavy cavalry charged, the Muslim skirmishers used their superior mobility, employing the kar wa far, charge and retreat tactics. They would dart in, launch a volley of arrows or a quick thrust, and withdraw before the Byzantine cavalry could engage them fully. This bled the enemy and kept them frustrated. The human wall. When the heavy Byzantine infantry advanced, the Muslim ranks held firm, utilizing short swords and spears to fight in close, disciplined formations, relying on the sheer tenacity of their collective defense to absorb the shock. The fighting raged for hours under the Syrian sun. The heavy Byzantine armor, while protective, became a liability, tiring the soldiers quickly, especially against the relentless, highly flexible Muslim pressure. The decisive charge. By mid-afternoon, the Byzantine attack had spent its initial fury. While they held the numerical advantage, they had failed to break the Muslim lines. Vahan, the Byzantine commander, saw that the Muslim center was still solid, but he pressed a final massive assault against the Muslim right wing commanded by Amr ibn al-As. The line began to buckle severely, and a rout seemed imminent. This was the moment Khalid had waited for. Instead of reinforcing the threatened right wing with nearby infantry, Khalid performed his signature move, the decisive, unexpected flank attack. He took his elite mobile guard, approximately 4,000 fresh, unwearied cavalry, and instead of plunging into the messy center fight, he wheeled them completely around the Muslim rear. He then struck the Byzantine left wing, which was already extended and focused on pushing the Muslim center. The attack was a surgical hammer blow. The Byzantine left, composed largely of Armenian and Slavic auxiliaries, who were not expecting a fresh, disciplined cavalry charge from the flank, shattered instantly. The momentum of Khalid's man was too great. Khalid did not stop there. He used the breach to turn his cavalry inward, driving a wedge into the Byzantine rear and rolling up their main battle line from the side. Panic erupted. The Ghassanid and mercenary contingents in the Byzantine rear, seeing their flank collapse and the mobile guard operating freely behind their lines, broke and fled. The collapse of the left wing exposed the entire flank of the main Byzantine center. Theodore and Vahan watched in horror as their massive, slow-turning army became hopelessly disorganized, its mass becoming a self-strangling liability rather than an advantage. The fruits of the heart. The rout was complete. Once the disciplined Muslim army saw the imperial standards fall and the main body of the enemy turned to flee, they pressed their attack with renewed ferocity. The massive, beautiful Roman army dissolved into a panicked retreat, scattering across the plain. The losses were catastrophic for the Byzantines. Contemporary sources suggest a terrible slaughter among the imperial troops who, in their heavy armor, were ill-equipped for a retreat through broken ground. Both Theodore and Vahan barely escaped the carnage, their reputation and the aura of Byzantine invincibility utterly shattered. Ajnadayn was more than a battle. It was a revelation. It proved definitively that the Caliphate's army was not a collection of raiders, but a cohesive, highly effective military machine driven by a purpose the Byzantine generals did not understand. The victory confirmed Khalid's maxim: discipline and belief defeat numbers. The immediate consequences were immense. The entire south of the Levant, including Palestine, was now exposed. The road to the greatest, most coveted prize in Syria, the magnificent, walled city of Damascus, was now open to the sword of God. The great imperial mobilization, meant to crush the invasion, had merely served to concentrate the Muslim forces' target. The Battle of Ajnadayn proved that the Muslim army possessed the tactical genius and the morale necessary to defeat the full might of the Roman Empire. The next step in the outline is Chapter 7, which deals with the complexity of the siege of Damascus. Would you like me to proceed with the double-edged siege of Damascus? The double-edged siege of Damascus, the Pearl of the East. The great victory at Ajnadayn cleared the path, but it did not win the war. The true prize, and the key to the entire province of Syria, was Damascus. Dubbed the Pearl of the East, Damascus was one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world. It was a fortress city, its rectangular walls of immense stone blocks, reinforced by solid towers, rising 20 feet high. It controlled the Ghouta oasis, the lush network of rivers and orchards that made life possible in the arid Syrian interior. And it was the administrative, economic, and cultural heart of the Byzantine East. To take Damascus was to sever the head of the imperial presence in the region. Khalid ibn al-Walid did not pause to savor the victory at Ajnadayn. He knew that the speed of his campaign was his greatest weapon. If he hesitated, Emperor Heraclius would find the resources to mobilize yet another, even larger army. He led his now unified forces north. The sight of Damascus, shimmering green against the desolate brown hills, was breathtaking. But the beauty of the city was matched by its resilience. The city was garrisoned by a fresh, determined Byzantine force led by Thomas, a high-ranking official and son-in-law of Emperor Heraclius, a man who had vowed to hold the city or die trying. Khalid established the siege in late August 634 CE. Knowing that the city was too large for a small army to truly encircle, he divided his army into 4 main corps, each tasked with blockading one of the 4 main gates: Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, the Jabiyah gate, westernmost; Amr ibn al-As, the Tuma gate, southwestern; Suraybil ibn Hassana, the Faradis gate, southwestern; Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, the Sakhir gate, southeastern. Khalid himself, ever the master of the unpredictable, took command of the largest and most strategically vital point, the East Gate, Bab Sharki. He also retained his mobile guard cavalry, positioning them in the desert perimeter, ready to move instantly to any point of attack or defense, maintaining his strategic flexibility. The siege began not with the expected thunder of siege engines — the Muslims still lacked true heavy siege capability — but with a quiet, grinding blockade. The divided loyalties. The real weakness of Damascus was not its walls, but the people behind them. The city was a microcosm of the collapsing Byzantine imperial order, suffering from deeply ingrained religious and class divisions. Thomas and the Byzantine elite, The Greek Orthodox officials, the wealthy merchants, and the soldiers were fiercely loyal to the empire. They believed, genuinely, that the Arabs were savage raiders and that salvation would soon arrive from Constantinople. They manned the walls with zeal, confident in the depth of their supplies and the strength of their position. But as the siege dragged into weeks, the covenant of safety granted at Bosra became the most insidious weapon against Damascus. Muslim spies and local Arab collaborators circulated news inside the city. The invaders are not looters. They offer peace, religious freedom, and lower taxes than the emperor. This created the double edge of the siege. The outer edge, Khalid, the physical pressure of the blockade, slowly starving the city of supplies and hope. The inner edge, the populace, the psychological pressure of divided loyalty, and the growing realization that the Muslim terms were politically and economically preferable to the imperial status quo. Thomas, realizing the severity of the internal threat, became ruthless. He suppressed dissent with an iron fist, executing any rumored collaborators to maintain control. The atmosphere inside the walls was thick with fear, paranoia, and hunger. The tension between generals. The long siege created an unbearable tension, not just between the Muslims and the Byzantines, but within the Muslim high command itself. This was the moment where the two defining philosophies of the early caliphate, Khalid's pragmatism and Abu Ubaida's piety, clashed most clearly. Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, the appointed caliph's commander-in-chief, though effectively supplanted in military authority by Khalid, was a man of profound gentleness and piety. He believed the ultimate goal was not military victory, but the establishment of God's justice on earth. He advocated for absolute patience, hoping the Damascenes would surrender peacefully and accept the jizya without a drop of blood shed. We must remember our Prophet's example, O Khalid, Abu Ubaidah argued during one tense council meeting. Patience is a virtue, and mercy is our strongest weapon. If we shed innocent blood, we negate the very justice we claim to bring. Let them starve their spirit first, then their bodies. Khalid ibn al-Walid listened, his jaw tight. He respected Abu Ubaidah immensely, seeing his piety as the anchor of the army. But Khalid was a soldier, tasked with the survival of the entire caliphate. He saw the danger clearly. Mercy is a virtue, Abu Ubaidah, but strategy is survival. Do you not see the scouting reports? The second, smaller Byzantine army has been gathered near Homs. They are waiting for us to exhaust ourselves. Every day we delay in taking Damascus is a day they use to gather strength. We must strike now while the iron is hot, or we risk being trapped between the walls and a relief force. The debate highlighted their fundamental differences. Khalid: victory first, then justice. Pragmatic, military-focused. Abu Ubaidah: justice first, then victory. Pious, moral-focused. Khalid's impatience grew. He believed that the moral good of saving tens of thousands of lives in the future by securing Syria quickly outweighed the immediate moral good of waiting patiently for a non-violent surrender now. He saw the prolonged siege as a violation of his duty to protect his own men from the coming counterattack. Thomas's desperate gambit. As autumn wore on, the internal situation in Damascus became critical. Famine was setting in, and murmurs of treason became louder. Thomas,
desperate to break the siege and buy time for Heraclius, decided on a daring counterattack. He observed that the Muslims relaxed their guards somewhat during the day, believing the massive walls were protection enough. He massed his best troops, Gothic and Roman mercenaries, and planned a simultaneous nighttime sortie from 2 gates, hoping to shatter the Muslim blockade and kill the high commanders. The attack was fierce. Thomas himself led the assault from the Tuma gate, fighting with a desperation that belied his clerical status. The fighting was chaotic, a sudden, desperate eruption in the darkness. Khalid, stationed at the east gate, received the desperate signals. He did not hesitate. Instead of rushing his entire force to reinforce the threatened gates, he again relied on the mobile guard. He sent a fast, disciplined column under the command of Rafi ibn Umayra to counterattack Thomas's flank, maintaining his position at the critical east gate. The mobile guard arrived like a whirlwind, striking the Byzantine flanks just as they were gaining momentum. The tide instantly turned. Thomas, fighting in the thickest part of the battle, was wounded by an arrow that struck his eye. The loss of their leader, combined with the sudden fresh cavalry on their flank, demoralized the Byzantine sortie. They retreated in disarray, dragging their wounded commander back inside the walls. The failure of the sortie was the final, crushing blow to the Byzantine defenders' morale. They had used their best troops, their commander had been wounded, and they had failed to even breach the Muslim blockade. The city's fate was sealed. The Feast of the Cross and the final push. The decisive moment came on a particularly significant night for the Christians of Damascus, the Feast of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, September 634 CE. Khalid spies, a network of local Christian Arabs, delivered vital intelligence. The celebration would be marked by immense feasts, music, and prayer. The Christian populace and, critically, many of the soldiers would be focused entirely on the religious festival. On the towers and walls, the guards would be fewer, slower, and distracted by the sound of revelry from within. Khalid recognized the terrible moral dilemma. To strike during a religious holiday would be seen as an act of sacrilege and ruthlessness, violating the spirit of mercy they preached. It would confirm the Byzantine propaganda that they were savages. Yet to wait was to invite the Ham's relief force and risk the annihilation of his entire army. The pragmatist won. The general of survival took command. He called his officers to the east gate, where he had already begun preparing his attack. He declared, his voice a low, fierce whisper in the darkness. Tonight, the sword is unsheathed. While they celebrate the glory of their past, we will seize the promise of our future. He gave clear, absolute orders to the commanders at the other 3 gates, Abu Ubaidah, Amr, Yazid. Maintain the blockade, do not attack, but if you hear the signal, press forward instantly. Khalid then led his chosen attack force, a small, elite column of men, including the revered companion Al-Qaqa ibn Amr al-Tamimi, to the sheer east gate. Under the cover of darkness and the muffled sounds of celebration, they executed a near impossible feat. Using ropes and grappling hooks crafted in secret, they scaled the massive, sheer wall. Al-Qaqa and his men were the first over the top, moving with the silence and efficiency of desert cats. They overwhelmed the few drunken or distracted guards, secured the wall walk, and then made the terrifying, desperate rush towards the main gate tower. The signal was given, the clang of the chains on the portcullis, followed by the cry of Allahu Akbar. Khalid himself, waiting outside, charged the moment the portcullis began to lift, plunging his horse into the narrow, dark breach. The battle inside the gate was swift and brutal, focused entirely on opening the way for the rest of his command. The east gate of Damascus had fallen by force, stealth, and audacity. The Muslims poured into the city, guided by the principle of necessity. The dual conquest. As Khalid's forces streamed through the east gate, fighting their way down the main thoroughfare, Thomas, the wounded commander, realized the inevitable. Seeing his main military forces being overwhelmed and the city descending into panic, he faced a choice: watch the city be conquered street by street, resulting in a wholesale slaughter and looting, or attempt to save the citizens through diplomacy. He immediately sent a messenger under a white flag to the nearest Muslim commander, which happened to be Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah at the Jabiyah gate. The messenger arrived, trembling, and offered the city's unconditional surrender in exchange for a covenant of safety, the very terms the Muslims had offered weeks ago at Bosra. Abu Ubaidah, whose heart yearned for peace and mercy, did not hesitate. Without knowing that Khalid had already breached the east gate by force, he accepted the surrender on the terms of Aman, guaranteed peace and protection, and signed the treaty immediately. Simultaneously, Khalid's men were fighting through the streets, conquering the city block by block. The moment of victory was now clouded by a profound conflict of principle. At the east gate, Damascus had fallen by the sword, unwatan, implying the populace was now fully subject to the conqueror's will, with property and life potentially forfeit. At the Jabiyah gate, Damascus had surrendered by treaty, sulhan, implying a guaranteed contractual peace with absolute respect for all lives, property, and churches. The two greatest generals of the Muslim army had conquered the city at the exact same moment, on the exact same day, but under two diametrically opposed legal principles. The battle was over, but the most important conflict, the conflict over the soul of the conquest, had just begun. Khalid and Abu Ubaidah met in the center of the conquered city, their faces grim, knowing that the legality and morality of the conquest now rested on which entry, the sword or the treaty, would prevail.
The Syrian sun set on a city that had bent but not broken. We saw that endurance is a silent kind of energy, and that conviction can be stronger than any armor. Khalid, the general of the unwearied heart, secured Damascus, but his destiny calls him forward. Beyond the walls lies an even greater city, one that whispers of holiness and commands the attention of the world. Close your eyes now and feel the quiet strength of those disciplined lines holding firm. Next time on Boring Bedtime, we will join the triumphant march down the ancient road towards the holy prize, the road to Jerusalem, and find out if a peaceful approach can ever conquer the world's most sacred city. Sleep soundly.